Hey, Jinx!
Truck stop!
What happened there? In this video, I'm going to give my thoughts, concerns, and opinions about the knives that I opened last month from Smoky Mountain Knife Works. Here they are. And in no particular order, this was just how I grabbed them and arranged them. Let's do the old left to right, top to bottom approach, starting with this knife. This knife is the one that's made by Revo, and it kind of confused me at first because I wasn't sure if it was like a really, really nice knife or a really, really cheap knife that's just dressed up. The verdict is still kind of out for me. The price point ended up putting it into the second tier of the package last month, along with the Steellausanne. Had no problems cutting it, taking it in and out of my pocket, opening it, closing it, all that stuff. It does everything that a knife should do. Just to point out a few of the features, the deep ride pocket clip is recessed into the liner, and you can put it on the other side. Some knives come with a little metal plate that sort of covers up the recess. This one does not. That's okay. It's just more holes for lint to go into, I guess. The issue I had with the pocket clip is that the end of it, which kind of stands off at this angle, really catches on your finger, and it pokes out of your pocket, and you could feel it. It's not sharp per se, but it definitely annoyed me on multiple occasions. Like, you know, you could feel it poking you when you run your hand by it. So there was that. Let's talk about the flipper tabs, which flipper tabs. See, I already confused myself. The thumb tabs, whatever the hell that thing is. It looks like a flipper from a pinball machine. That's why I called them flipper tabs. Anyway, I don't like them. I don't think they're necessarily superior to regular thumb studs, but they don't have a whole lot of grippiness to them, contrary to how they look. So I find myself misfiring quite a lot. So it just takes time to get used to, and then after a while, 80% of the time, it fires every time. Another thing that I found odd about it is that the pivot is on bearings, which is perfectly fine for a flipper knife, but it's also spring assisted. So that combination is, see, I just misfired. That combination is a bit overkill. I don't think you'd be able to tell the difference between bearings and washers with open assistance, really. So basically you've got the pivot of a flipper, but then when you go to close the knife, you got to deal with, you know, the resistance from the spring. That also annoyed me. It's been a while since I've carried an open assist knife, and I just kind of forgot how much of a chore it makes closing the knife, you know, compared to a non-open assisted flipper. Over the course of the month, the centering started to drift a little bit. You can see it getting closer and closer to one of the liners, and normally that's accompanied with blade play, and indeed it does have some blade play. I could fix that by tightening the pivot, but I wanted to leave it there to show you. Now there's one thing that I think this knife does great, and that is the liner lock. The way that they jimped the part that you push over, and the way that it just barely sticks out a little bit, like so, that is very nicely done. I never miss. It's very comfortable. It's great. That is one thing that Revo did very, very well. Then we got this old-timer knife, which came in that combo pack with some cards. I didn't really carry this one because It's basically a trapper, but with a funky tool. I still don't really know what it's for. It does resemble the kind of tool that an equestrian would use to clean out the hoof of a horse, and, you know, clip its hoof nail thing. So I guess that's what it is. I'm still not sure, but at the end of the day, it's basically the clip point blade of a trapper with a really annoying piece of metal sticking out of the handle, making it very uncomfortable to hold. And I've carried trappers before. I've carried clip point blades plenty of times, so I feel like I didn't really have anything to learn from this knife. Although it would have been interesting to find a use for this thing that doesn't involve animals, or animal maintenance. It just didn't happen. Sorry. I said I was going to go left to right, and then I went down. So let's come over to the smallest of the small. I only have a little bit to say about this. Haha, get it? I've used it twice. I actually did use it to open packages, just kind of as a gag, and it pretty much just tears the package because it's not sharp. In case you didn't know, that's just blunt metal right there. I thought about sharpening it just for fun. I just didn't have the time. Oh, then we get to this knife. This one was really interesting. This MKM, I don't remember the name of the model, but the scales have this fat carbon lava look. So a few things about this knife. It's got a very nice pivot. You can flip it out through pushing on the little slot here, like so. I didn't really do that very much when I did use it. I just found it fine to do it like that. Now the slot is nice and chamfered, which makes opening it very comfortable. So I like that. There's this piece kind of cut out to give it this hole back here. And I get why it's there, but it didn't offer any kind of utility for me. But if I was like climbing a mountain or something, I could, you know, carabine that to something. I guess that's kind of what this knife was sort of intended for, is outdoorsy, hiking, rock climbing, something. But I didn't have time to do any of that this month, so I just used it to open boxes and cut tape and stuff like that. It was fine. The M390 blade gave me no troubles, but I didn't really do anything with it that would warrant troubles. It's been a while since I've carried a knife with a wire clip, and it's fine. The advantage of the wire clip is that there's no sharp edges to annoy you in any way, but it did take a little bit of oomph to actually get into the pocket. It's one of those things where like you shove it down into your pocket and you feel like you're like pulling your own pants down before it finally goes. I got really curious about these fat carbon style scales, so I put this under a microscope, and I got a real close-up image of some of the carbon fiber. I also had to look at the scales from the side to see that multi-layer effect, and that was really cool. Now, I've been trying to figure out why this knife retails for $130, and I handed it to my girlfriend, and I was like, what do you think of this knife? How much do you think it goes for? She said, I think she said like 20 bucks. And then I mentioned some other things. I was like, well, it's really good steel, and it's an exclusive. And she's like, okay, well, in that case, I'd say 75 bucks. And I said, yeah, actually, that's about the price point that I would have landed on, too. I think it's a combination of a lot of little things. The steel, the exclusive factor, the fat carbon scales, I imagine, are not too easy or cheap to make. And you just put it all together, and it comes out to $130. So I did enjoy it. It did not actually grow on me, believe it or not. It's pretty much exactly what I thought when I first opened it. Oh, yeah, we gotta talk about this one. So this is the cheapest knife from last month. It was $8, I think. It's got big, thick, orange G10 scales with a black washed blade, and it rides on Teflon washers with a high riding pocket clip. and a liner lock. All that for $8. It's actually a pretty good knife in the end. I didn't carry it for a very long time because it came without thumb studs. And I went online, and sure enough, in the photos, it looks like it's supposed to have thumb studs. I don't know who dropped the ball there. Did they run out of thumb studs that day? Did quality control go out for a smoke and let a few of these slip through? But it turns out that somebody else left a comment on the Smoky Mountain Knife Works website, and they too got a knife without thumb studs. When I learned this information, believe it or not, it made me like this knife even more, even though it's really annoying to open. But when I did use it, it was actually pretty good. In the lab, when you're wearing latex or nitrile gloves, you get a little bit of extra grippiness that made opening it a lot easier. You just couldn't do it one-handed. But when I did cut with it, it was comfortable, it did the job, and shit, for $8, I've paid a lot more for a lot less. So I feel like I didn't really give this knife its due because of the whole thumb stud thing. I was happy that when I did give it a chance, it was surprisingly good. Then we come to the Steellausanne by Cold Steel. This knife was awesome. The big pocket clip, which I was a little concerned about. I was like, that's different. I wonder what that's going to be like. It's good. It's really good. Yeah, no sharp metal edges to catch on anything. I suppose it can be reversed. I'm actually not sure. I just had that thought, like, could it be taken off and put on the other side? Maybe you just have to swap out the screws. Maybe these screws are a little bit longer than these screws. I don't know. Haven't tried it. Anyway, deployment is excellent. I love the look of the polished steel. It's menacing, but that's Cold Steel for you. Most of their stuff looks menacing. They have this lock bar thing, which kind of locks the lock. I never used it. I just completely forgot that it was even there. I don't think this knife is in any danger of failing. I haven't done a spine whack test or anything, but shit, it's a pretty solid lock up there, so it was never any concern of mine. I was also a little bit nervous about the fact that the bunch of my ball things, bearings, they're actually kind of a smallish diameter, and I've encountered before where when you have little small radius set of bearings, it has a tendency to introduce a lot of blade play over time, and it's just not a lot of material for that, fulcrum. But this is a well-designed knife because that never actually happened. The centering is perfect. I only have a couple of complaints about this knife. One of them is that this flipper tab could be chamfered a little bit better. You can kind of see that they did chamfer it there. But somehow it still feels a little sharp. I don't get it. Like, how do they do that? How do they manage to chamfer it yet keep it a little bit sharp? It's not terrible, but it could be better. But my biggest complaint is the liner lock. So when you look at the knife from this direction, you can see that there's a little wavy cutout there to kind of, flow with the contour of the knife. But that means that the only place that you've got to push on the lock is this little nub that sticks out, and it sucks. It's very uncomfortable. It pokes into your thumb at an odd angle, and it hurts a little bit, and I can imagine over time I'd form a callus just from doing that. So that was one thing I did not like about the Steellausanne. And I gotta tell you, if it weren't for that liner lock thing, this knife would be a 10 out of 10 for me. Then we have the Benchmark Paratrooper knife. I actually did use this in the lab a little bit, but I very quickly found out that, you know what? I should have known just by looking at it. This knife is not made for cutting. It's made for stabbing. One of the ways I should have known that is based on, one, how thick the knife is, the angle that it's cut, and the fact that it's just not sharp. It's not sharp at all. It's kind of like a bayonet. If you've ever handled like a brand new bayonet, you know, army surplus, they're not sharp. They're made for stabbing. The other thing I kind of forgot to talk about was the brand, Benchmark. They've been around for a long time. They actually used to make fighting knives back in the day, and they, along with Gerber, made the Tac 2, my grail knife that I finally got a hold of and made a video on. You should check it out. So they're still around, still making stuff. I was cutting tape with it, not opening boxes, like cutting tape off the roll to like tape something up myself. And I have really had to do this funky move where I would like swipe and follow through, or else it just wouldn't do it. It would just knock the roll of tape across the room. So yeah, this it's a stabby knife. So I only used it a couple of times, but just for the brand name recognition. I mean, I'm a fan of Benchmark's work, so that's pretty much it. Pocket clip's really loose. And I call this a glass breaker, but given that this is probably, you know, it's a paratrooper knife, it's a stabby knife, that's probably more appropriately called a skull crusher. So those are my thoughts on last month's knives. It's not very easy to pick a favorite. I think it's between these two. And if I were really pressed to pick one, I would say it's the Steellausanne. My natural inclination was to go for the most expensive one because, you know, that's just the bias, I guess. It's the most expensive one, it's got to be good, right? Well, it is good. I just like this better.